The noise of the printer spitting out paper quickened along with her breathing. The woman in the blue vest clenched her hands, her long nails tapping together, as if trying to hide her trembling. On the other side of the cramped table, the policeman in the black vest didn't even sit down. He stood, half his body in the cold light of the ceiling, half obscured by the shadow of the metal cabinet. The camera on his chest blinked a discreet dot, like an eye that doesn't blink. The loss prevention. Manager pushed a folder toward the center. Inside were screenshots, receipts, schedules, and a line of numbers that always seemed longer than she imagined. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't need to. She tried to start with a quick explanation, the kind that comes out before the embarrassment gets stuck in your throat. She said it was a misunderstanding. She said someone used her number. She said the ATM froze. She said anything. The police officer raised his hand, a short, polite gesture, and pointed to one of the pages. In the photo, it was her. The same loose hair, the same bracelet on her wrist, the same posture leaning over the cash register drawer. The difference was that there, the image froze the instant when her fingers pulled out a bill and disappeared under her vest. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, the room seemed smaller. The manager pulled out another sheet of paper. Now it was a video printed in frames, as if someone had turned movement into evidence. One frame showed her hand on the drawer, the next a quick glance to the sides, another the folded note, and the last the vest adjusted, as if adjusting one's uniform and adjusting one's own secret along with it. The police officer said her name calmly, the way one says the name of someone who still has a chance to tell the truth. He didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply put the words out there and waited. She answered in a whisper. Her throat hurt. What nobody saw in the video was what came before and after, the part that isn't captured from the ceiling angle, the part where she would get home and turn off her cell phone because she couldn't stand the message notification from the landlord asking for the overdue rent, the part where I would open the refrigerator and see more air than food, the part where I would look at my sleeping son and do calculations in the dark, those endless calculations, because there was always something missing. The Walmart in that city was near a highway and a cluster of neighborhoods where everyone seemed to have a reason to be in a hurry. It was a large building, brightly lit, with a parking lot that at night turned into a mirror of lights. Inside, everything had sound. The beeping of the scanners, the creaking of the shopping carts, the hurried conversation of people who didn't want to stay there any longer than necessary. She had landed the job after weeks of handing out resumes to places that didn't even respond. She started as a cashier, a shift that began early and ended when her body was already tired of smiling at strangers. At first, she made a point of being proper. She adjusted her name tag, said good morning to the security guard, asked her colleagues how their weekends were. She quickly learned where the call supervisor button was, which codes to use for fruit, how to deal with customers who wanted to argue about coupon prices and so on. There were days when she would come home feeling like she hadn't stopped for a second. Even so, her salary didn't stretch. The hourly rate seemed like a nice thing on paper until the paper turned into a bill. There was daycare, there was gas, there was an old fine that she swore she had resolved, but it kept reappearing like a ghost. There was the car repair, the kind of repair the mechanic talks about as if it was simple and cheap, and then gives the total and your stomach sinks. She was also proud. She didn't ask for help easily. Her mother lived in another state and already had enough problems. Her father wasn't someone to call on. Her friends each had their own problems to solve, so she did what she could. She'd manage a purchase here, cut expenses there, invent a recipe with what she had. On a Friday, when the checkout line seemed endless and the supervisor had grown irritated by a long queue, a customer dropped a $20 bill on the floor. She watched the bill roll under the counter, almost in slow motion. She called the customer over, but the woman had already pushed her cart and disappeared into the crowd in the clothing section. The bill lay there, quiet, as if waiting for an owner. The rules said to call someone, register the lost and found, and hand it over to the manager. She knew that, but that day the cell phone bill was overdue. The rent was late. The notice on the building gate said that on Monday they would start charging an extra fee. And she thought of a silly phrase a colleague had once said, half jokingly, half seriously, "Nobody will miss a banknote." She took it, just that one at first. She put it in her pocket, her heart pounding strangely. Nothing happened. No one showed up asking questions. The world didn't collapse. Her son slept through the night. She paid for the phone and felt a relief that lasted less than it should have. The problem with quick relief is that it teaches a path. The following week, she took out a small note when she counted her change and realized there was extra. She told herself it was a system error. She said the cash register always shows a difference and nobody charges when the difference is too high. She said she was just picking up what was already confusing. Then it became a habit. Not every day, though. She had limits, or at least that's what she kept repeating. She'd take 5 here, 10 there. A little from the cash register, a little from returns, a little from cancellations, something she learned to do with a speed that the managers praised without knowing why. When the store was full, it was easier. When it was empty, she avoided it. At first, she thought she was being careful. She looked at the cameras, at the mirror on the ceiling, at the security guard's position. She adjusted her body to stay out of the angle, as if an angle meant a closed door. It wasn't. Loss prevention never slept, and didn't depend solely on the naked eye. There were reports. There were standards. There was the kind of detail that an average cashier wouldn't even imagine exists. A man named Marcus worked in asset protection. He wore a grey shirt, walked around the store looking like he was just checking labels, and nobody paid much attention. Marcus was good at appearing invisible. When he spoke to someone, it was low, without fanfare. He didn't like to accuse without being sure. He had seen innocent employees destroyed by rumors, so he gathered evidence like someone putting together a puzzle that only makes sense at the end. He noticed her, named first in the weekly discrepancies report. It wasn't an absurd amount. It was a bunch of small, repeated amounts, always on her shift. The system marked cancellations. It marked returns. It marked manual deductions. Marcus opened the history and saw that the number of her transactions was high, normal for someone dedicated. The difference was that some of these transactions ended in cancellation too quickly, as if she already knew the way, as if it were an automatic gesture. Marcus pulled up images from random days, not just one day, because one day is misleading. He picked Monday, Thursday, Sunday. In each one, the same dance. The quick glance to the side, the hand that disappears, the drawer that opens at an inopportune time, the folded note. He didn't run to the general manager. He called the front-end supervisor, an older woman who had seen a lot and still felt sad when she saw someone get lost. The supervisor watched the video, her jaw clenched. Not out of anger, out of disappointment. She liked her. She had defended her when a customer complained without reason. She had given her time off when her son was sick. She saw her face on the screen and felt as if she were watching a family member do something no one wanted to see. She asked Marcus to confirm. Marcus confirmed. She asked for time. Marcus gave it to her. 2 more weeks passed. Marcus did something that seemed excessive, but it was procedure. He started noting every time her cash register showed a discrepancy. He began recording the exact time. He started comparing it to transactions from other cash registers during the same period. The pattern became all too clear. The discrepancy wasn't from the system. It was from her. Meanwhile, she had no idea. She thought she was managing. She thought the risk was small and under control. There were times when she felt bad, yes. On her way to work, she would look at her uniform on the passenger seat and think about stopping, about returning it, about confessing to someone. Then she would remember the rent, remember her son, remember the look on the daycare manager's face when she was late with her payments. And the plan to stop would become a plan to stop the following week. The day everything blew up started out all too ordinary. She went in, fastened her badge, said good morning to the security guard. She grabbed the drawer, counted the bills, went through her usual ritual. It was very busy. An electronic sale had brought people in. Early, customers were discussing headphone models, warranties, and prices online. She was at the checkout when a man came in with a small television and 2 boxes of cereal. He paid in cash, crumpled bills. She counted them, gave him change, and closed the drawer. Then a woman returned, saying she had swiped the wrong card and needed a refund. The supervisor appeared and authorized it. Everything normal. But that normalcy was just a disguise. Marcus warned over the radio, a whisper on the internal channel. He called the shift manager, he called the front-end supervisor. He said he had enough. He said that if they were going to do it, it had to be now. The company policy was clear. No confrontation in the middle of the room, no making a scene, no touching the person. Take them to the small room, talk, offer them a chance to explain. If it was confirmed, call the police. Document it, all calmly. The supervisor approached her cash register with a weak smile. She said she needed to speak with her for a minute. Something about scheduling. Her voice sounded natural. She believed her because she trusted that woman. She turned off the light at the register, put up the closed sign, and followed behind, feeling only a slight discomfort, like when someone calls you into the principal's office at school. They went through the back door, down the hallway that smelled of cardboard and cleaning products, past the corner where the forklifts and pallets were kept. They arrived at the small asset protection room, a room without a window, just a table, 2 chairs, and a monitor displaying camera images. Inside, the loss prevention manager was already waiting, seated. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The shift manager closed the door. The atmosphere seemed to change. She asked what it was. The supervisor didn't answer right away. She pulled out a chair for her to sit down. She sat down. She still didn't understand. The manager opened the folder and said they needed to talk about discrepancies in the cash register. He gave her name and employee number. He asked if she knew of any reason for those discrepancies. She felt the blood rush to her face. She said no. She said that sometimes the system is confusing. She said that customers give the wrong change. She said that someone might have taken her drawer. She spoke quickly, her voice rising without her realizing it. Marcus turned on the monitor. He put on the video. The image showed her too clearly. It showed the exact moment she pulled out a bill and placed it under her vest. It showed her glancing from side to side. It showed the drawer closing. It showed her smiling at the next customer. She tried to laugh, a short laugh that didn't fit the scene. She said that didn't prove she took it. She said she could have been keeping something. She said it could have been a receipt. The manager fast-forwarded the video. He showed another scene, and another, different days, different values, the same gesture. Then he showed a printed report with the numbers added up. It was the total estimated from the differences in the videos. The final line was large enough to make the ground seem to pull away from him. She stared at it, as if it belonged to someone else, as if someone had mistakenly put her name on it. Her brain tried to escape, to find a way out, to invent an excuse that would work. There wasn't one. The supervisor said her name again, more softly. She said she had a chance to speak. She said that the more honest she was now, the better it would be for her. The supervisor spoke as if trying to hold back someone who is already slipping. She took a deep breath. Her chest ached. Her voice came out low and broken. She said she was having problems. She said she didn't want to hurt anyone. She said she thought it wasn't enough. She said she was going to return it. Marcus asked when. She didn't answer. The manager asked how much. She said she didn't know. The truth was she did know, but the number was too heavy to say. The shift manager explained that according to procedure, they would call the police. The word police made the room spin. She asked them not to call. She asked them to resolve it right there. She promised to pay. She promised to work for free. She promised anything. Marcus didn't argue. He just said it wasn't their choice at that point. He said there was video, a report, her signature on every shift. He said the company had an obligation to report. He said this without pleasure, without malice. It was a door closing. The policeman arrived shortly after. He didn't enter as someone who wanted to humiliate her. He entered as someone who had seen good people do bad things and bad people feign remorse. He greeted everyone, looked at her, and asked for identification. She handed it over with a trembling hand. He explained what was happening. He spoke calmly, using simple words. He said that, at that moment, she wasn't being formally interrogated, but that everything was being recorded by the camera. He said she could remain silent. He said she could call a lawyer. He said she didn't need to answer. She heard and, at the same time, she didn't hear. Her mind was far away, on her son, on the way to daycare, on what she would say to him when he asked why his mother hadn't picked him up. The police officer asked her to stand up. She stood, slowly. He put on the handcuffs, without tightening them too much, and she felt the cold metal as if it were real in a new way, as if everything up until then had been a movie and now it was becoming real. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry out loud. She just swallowed them. Marcus handed more papers to the police officer. Reports, screenshots, signatures. The officer glanced over them as if confirming the basics, because the judge would see the rest later. In the aisle, the sounds of the store seemed distant. Shopping carts, conversations, the beeping of the cash, registers, as if nothing had changed. She walked past with her hands clasped in front of her, escorted, head down. One employee saw her and looked away. Another pretended it wasn't him. One customer didn't even notice. In the parking lot, the icy wind hit her face, and that's when the silent tears came. The police officer opened the back door of the car and asked her to get in carefully. She got in. The seat was hard. The window had an invisible grate in the glass. The car smelled of plastic and stale coffee. The police officer closed the door. Before turning around to go in first, he said he would call someone to pick up her son if she wanted to give him a number. His words were the first human gesture she managed to make in that moment. She gave him the number of her neighbor, a woman who lived on the same floor of the building and who sometimes looked after the boy when she was late for work. Her voice faltered as she spoke. On the way to the police station, she looked at the city. Streets as if she'd never seen them before. Fast food signs, gas stations, people crossing the street with shopping bags. Everything was ordinary. And there she was, inside a police car, arrested, her life crumbling beneath her. The police officer spoke little. The radio crackled occasionally. He answered one call, something about an accident with no injuries. Then he hung up and remained silent. At the police station, the procedure was quick and, at the same time, lengthy. Fingerprints, photo, basic questions, name, address. She answered like someone who was somewhat out of her mind. When they asked her to take off her belt and watch, she did, and realized that the bracelet she wore to work was still on her wrist. That cheap bracelet, bought at a stall, was almost ridiculous there. An officer led her to a smaller room and offered her water. She accepted, but the water seemed to have no taste. The police officer who had taken her in appeared at the door, spoke to someone, then went inside. He said the charges would be filed and that she would be presented to the judge soon, depending on the time. He said she might be released on bail or with a commitment to appear in court, but that it wasn't his decision. She nodded. When she was alone for a few minutes, she stared at the floor and let her head fall. She wanted to disappear. She thought about all the times she had seen videos of people being arrested and had thought she would never do something like that. And there she was. The neighbor across the street picked up the boy from daycare. The daycare called her number and it went to voicemail. She called again. She called the neighbor. The neighbor came. She picked up the boy, put him in the car, and tried to explain that his mother had had a problem at work. He asked if his mother was sick. The neighbor said his mother would be fine. He accepted it because he was a child, and children accept what they say when the world hasn't yet shown them all the ways to break things. Hours later, with the sun lower in the sky, she left the police station with a piece of paper in her hand and a date set for a hearing. Someone had paid the bail. A distant aunt she called crying because she had no one else to help. She left in her work clothes, the blue vest stored in a plastic bag that the police station returned because it was just clothing. The vest felt as heavy as a rock. She got into her aunt's car and didn't say much. The aunt didn't say much either. She just drove, her face hard, because she was torn between anger and worry. They stopped at the building, and the neighbor got out with the boy in her arms. When the boy saw his mother, he ran and hugged her legs, not understanding anything. She crouched down with difficulty and hugged him back, feeling the weight of something that couldn't be explained with a simple sentence. The night passed with little sleep. She couldn't get the moment from the video out of her head. The repeated gesture, the quick glance, the way it seemed so easy on screen, as if it were someone else. She wanted to go back in time and squeezing her own hand to stop it. That wasn't possible. The next day, the phone rang early. It was the loss prevention manager. His voice was formal, almost cold. He said she was suspended and, because of what had happened, would be dismissed from the company. He said she shouldn't return to the store. He said she could receive information about her termination by email. Her email address was an old one she barely used, but he had it in the system. She thanked me. I didn't even know why she thanked me. Maybe because the automatic politeness still worked, even when everything falls apart. Then came the part that hurt in a different way, the messages from her colleagues, some asking what happened, others saying they had heard things. One of them, the supervisor, sent a short text. She said she was very sorry. She said she wished she had asked for help. She said it wasn't too late to try to fix her life. The message wasn't judgmental, but it hurt more than if it had been. The hearing was scheduled for a few weeks later. In the meantime, she tried to find another job. She went to interviews, wearing the same simple clothes, her hair tied back, and a smile she couldn't contain. When they asked why she had left her last job, she froze. She couldn't lie, and telling the story would destroy her right there. Some interviews didn't even ask. They just looked at her. History and said they would get in touch. They never did. She tried selling things, a television, an old microwave, clothes that still had the tags on them. The money came in and went out quickly, like water through a sieve. Her aunt helped with a month's rent. Her neighbor helped with food. She swallowed her pride because pride doesn't pay the bills. And even accepting help, she felt a kind of shame that made her face burn. The night before the hearing, she didn't sleep. She sat on the sofa, staring at the blue vest inside the bag, as if that object were a dead animal she couldn't bring herself to throw away. The boy slept in the room, breathing heavily, his innocence completely preserved there. In the courtroom, the air was dry and the chairs were hard. She sat next to the public defender she had managed to get, a man who spoke quickly and seemed to deal with this every day. He explained what could happen, spoke of settlement, restitution, the possibility of parole. She listened and replied yes, 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 because any other words seemed impossible to find. When they called her name, her legs went weak. She stood and walked to the front. The judge looked over his glasses, read the report, and asked if she understood the charge. She said yes. The judge asked if she pleaded guilty or not guilty. The lawyer whispered. She said guilty. The judge spoke about consequences, about value, about broken trust. He spoke firmly, without being cruel. He handed down a sentence that included restitution payments over time, community service hours, and participation in a mentoring program, in addition to a record that would remain on her record. It wasn't imprisonment at that moment, but it was a mark. The judge said that if she failed to make payments or fulfill her obligations, then imprisonment could occur. She nodded, feeling a new weight, the weight of having a deadline. She left the courthouse with the paper in her hand, the same type of paper she had received at the police station, only now with details about what she should do. The lawyer told her not to miss appointments, not to ignore them, to stay in touch. She said she would. This time she believed it. In the courthouse parking lot, she leaned against her aunt's car and cried for real. She cried silently for a few minutes because she didn't want people to see, but she cried. Her aunt waited, not knowing what to say. Then he placed his hand on her shoulder, a quick touch. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't complete acceptance. It was all her aunt had at that moment. The following days were an exercise in survival. She found temporary work in a warehouse, the night shift, carrying boxes. Her body ached, but the supervisor didn't ask many questions. The pay was less than before, but it was something. She went, came back, showered, took the boy to school, and slept soundly. The community service was at a center that distributed food. She folded boxes, organized donations, saw people in worse situations than hers, and felt a mixture of guilt and fear. Sometimes a volunteer would talk to her, unaware of her story. Sometimes someone knew and remained silent. She did her work and avoided looking around too much, as if the whole world might be watching. One afternoon downtown, she ran into a woman who had worked at the same Walmart store, but in a different department. The woman recognized her and simply said hi, without any irony. She asked how she was doing. She replied that she was trying. The woman said that she too had made mistakes in life and that the important thing was not to lie to herself. The phrase stayed in her head for the rest of the day. The police officer with the body camera never reappeared, but his image remained. The calm way he spoke, the way he put on the handcuffs without tightening them too much. That, somehow, had shown her something she hadn't expected. The system might be cold, but the people inside it were still people. This didn't erase what she had done. It only took away some of the blind fear and introduced a kind of reality. Months later, she got a job at a small cleaning company. No cashier, no money in hand. The owner asked about her background because the form required it. She told the truth, trembling. The owner remained silent. Then he said he needed people who would show up and work. He said she would have to be punctual. He said he couldn't promise anything. She accepted. It was the first time in a long time that someone had given her a chance without demanding she be perfect. She started out cleaning offices at night. She would wipe down desks, empty trash cans, clean bathrooms. The smell of cleaning products clung to her hair. The radio music was always low. She liked the silence, because in the silence there were no complaining clients, no managers demanding smiles. There was only the work and the chance to do the job right. She paid the tax refund in small installments. Each payment was a stab at her pride and a constant reminder of her mistake. She kept the receipts as if they were amulets, proof that she was complying. Sometimes there wasn't enough money at the end of the month, and she thought back to that easy way out before. The thought came as a reflex. She breathed and cut off the thought as if cutting a thread. One late afternoon, months later, she drove past Walmart. She didn't go in. She had no reason to. She just drove by. She saw the sign, the crowded parking lot, people going in and out, with shopping bags. The place seemed the same. The store's life continued as always. She realized that, for the company, she had become a case, a number, a filed report. For her, she was the center of a scar. She pulled into a gas station and sat for a few minutes with her hands on the steering wheel. The boy was in the back seat, talking about a cartoon, not understanding the significance of the journey. She listened and responded with short sentences, trying to be present. At home, she put away simple groceries, helped the boy with his homework, sat at the table, and opened an envelope from the court. It was a deadline reminder. She read it, signed it, and put it in her folder. She did everything carefully. Each gesture was an attempt to be someone trustworthy again. Later, in the silence after the boy fell asleep, she picked up the bag containing the blue vest. She took out the vest. She ran her hand over the fabric. She remembered the first day, the pride, the gleaming name tag. She remembered the last day, The hallway, the cold metal. She didn't throw it away. She folded it and put it away at the back of the closet. Not as a good memory, as a reminder. The next day, she got up early for work. She made coffee, put on her simple uniform, and tied her hair back. At the door, she paused for a second, breathed, and looked at the building. There was no dramatic music, no pretty phrases, just one footstep after another, and the distant sound of a radio crackling somewhere. 2 weeks after starting her new job, she received a letter in the mail with the store's name in the corner, the kind of envelope that makes your stomach clench even before you open it. Inside, a simple notification: no return order. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was a ban on entering that Walmart indefinitely. The paper didn't contain exaggerated threats, just informed her that if she entered, she could be arrested for trespassing. The words were cold and direct, and that made everything more real. She read, sitting on the kitchen floor, the boy eating cereal at the table and talking about school. She responded with sounds of agreement, but her thoughts were on the brightly lit parking lot, the automatic doors, the place where she had spent so much of her life. Now, she couldn't even buy milk there. At the end of that afternoon, she needed to go to the market in another part of town, a smaller and more expensive place. Her gas tank was almost empty, and she drove slowly, as if saving. On fuel would save on gas. She entered the market with the feeling of being watched, even though no one knew her. She grabbed basic items and left quickly. In the car, she looked at the receipt and did a mental calculation. The price difference was small for each item, but added up it became a huge whole. She thought about the money she had taken from the orientation program the court had mandated. Was in a room in an old county building with plastic chairs and a coffee maker always on. It wasn't a motivational talk. It was a group of different people, each carrying a mistake: a man in a workshop uniform, an older woman who had hidden merchandise in her bag, a young man who had altered a label. Nobody wanted to be there, and for that very reason, nobody pretended much. The group facilitator spoke without mincing words. She didn't insult, she only described consequences. She showed examples of how a small act can snowball in a matter of months. She spoke of jobs that will never return. She spoke of blocked credit. She spoke of costs. She spoke of family. The facilitator didn't try to elicit tears, and that worked better than any drama. At one of the meetings, a police officer appeared to explain the procedures for approaching and registering incidents. He entered with the same demeanor as someone who would prefer none of it were necessary. When he took off his hat and sat down, she recognized him immediately. He was the same one from the Walmart room, the same way of breathing before speaking, the same calmness. She lowered her head. She felt like disappearing under the chair. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't point at anyone. He simply explained how things proceed after the police car closes its door. The report, the prosecutor, the court, the queue of decisions that one person no longer controls. He said that many people think it can be fixed on the same day. He said that it almost never works. What works is minimizing damage, doing what you're told, showing up. At some point his gaze swept across the room and lingered on her for a second. It wasn't a threatening look. It was a look of recognition, as if to say that he did remember, and that she was still there, breathing. He looked away. He continued speaking. When the meeting ended, she waited for everyone to leave. She deliberately stayed behind, organizing her bag, pretending to look for something. The policeman passed near the door, and she felt the words pushing out. Unintentionally, she said she was trying to do the right thing. She didn't apologize to him because shame held her back. She just said she was trying. He nodded, a small movement, and replied softly that this was what mattered. He told her not to be absent and not to complicate things with being late. He said that when someone stops showing up, the system doesn't try to understand. It just reacts. The phrase didn't come as nice advice. It came as a simple warning. She left the building, and the cool air of the parking lot helped her breathe easier. On some days, while working as a cleaner, she took the bus because her car was starting to show signs of breaking down completely. The bus passed through streets she had previously rushed to get to her shift at Walmart. Looking at the places through the window, without any hurry, made everything seem distant and yet too close at the same time. Sometimes she would see the blue sign in the distance and turn her face away. The boy, over time, stopped asking why she had changed jobs. Children adapt when adults provide routine. She made sure he didn't lack the basics, even if those basics were tight. She took him to the park when she had time off. She made pasta on bad days. She read him stories at night, even when she was tired. It was the kind of thing that doesn't appear in reports, and yet it held her world together. The repayment installments continued. The community service, too. 1 month her son was sick and she missed a day. The supervisor of her temporary work program didn't like it. She almost lost her shift. One day, her car wouldn't start and she arrived late at the donation center. The person in charge took note. She found herself on the edge of the precipice again, not because she wanted to steal, but because she was exhausted from trying to do everything at once. 1 week, a colleague from the warehouse commented during her break that you could carry small things in your pocket and nobody would notice. She said it laughing, as if it were a trick. She felt a sharp shock in her chest. The colleague continued talking, citing people who do it and never get away with it. She didn't make a speech. She didn't point a finger. She just said, in her normal voice, that something always came up. It just didn't happen immediately. Her colleague looked at her as if she were annoying. She changed the subject, and she stayed there, holding her glass of water, thinking that life had a cruel way of testing you, exactly where it still hurts. When she got home, she found another letter from the court. It wasn't a threat, it was an update. Even so, her heart raced. She opened it, read it, took a breath. It was just a payment confirmation notice. She put it in her folder and, for a moment, felt like laughing nervously. Her fear now was just paper. A few days later, the former supervisor sent another message. She said she was leaving the store, that she was going to retire. She said that, despite everything, she hoped she would get back on her feet. The message ended without emojis, without a prepared sentence. That's all. She read it and took a while to reply. She wrote and erased. She wrote again. In the end, she sent a simple thank you and a short sentence saying that she still remembered the time off she had received when the boy was sick. The supervisor replied that she remembered too, and that was it. That night, she opened the locker and took out the blue vest once more. She ran, her thumb along the edge where the name tag was attached. The fabric was worn in one spot from so much contact with the cashier's counter. She imagined the vest in a landfill and felt relief. Then she imagined the vest disappearing and felt fear, as if without it she would forget what she had done and repeat it. So she put it away again, slowly, like someone putting away a blade. The next day she went to the donation center to complete her last hours. The place was busier than usual. There was a community event, a larger distribution, and lots of boxes arriving. Volunteers were running around. She put on her gloves and went to work. Amidst the noise, she heard a radio crackling, just like the one in the patrol car, only now it was a volunteer coordinating deliveries. She glanced to the side and saw the policeman, the same one, helping to unload a van. He wasn't there as an authority figure, he was there as an enforcer. He carried boxes like anyone else, sweating, laughing at someone's joke. For a second, she stood still, unsure whether to hide her face. He turned and saw her. There was no conversation. There was no grand gesture. He simply raised his chin in greeting and went back to work. She picked up a box and lifted it as well. The weight strained her arms and brought her to the gift. She walked to the table, placed the box, opened it, and separated the packages. A child ran down the aisle with an apple in hand. A lady thanked them for a bag of food. A volunteer sang a bit of off-key music. And in the midst of all that, life seemed less congested for a few minutes, as if she had found a crack that had nothing to do with taking from someone, but rather with enduring. The radio crackled again. Someone called her name, and she answered without lifting her head. She took a deep breath and went back to sorting packages, without pausing, without looking at anyone.